Hey, this is Michael Wynn with Oasis Ministries. I'm Pastor Anthony Wynn's son, and we have an exciting thing we would like to make available to you. We would like to give you one of our prayer bracelets. This has been a passion and a vision of Pastor since the beginning of this ministry, is soul winning. So what this is, you wear this thing, put this bracelet on, and you get this card, and we will send this to you free of charge and free shipping. You list 5 names on the back, and you are carrying this around with you, remembering every time you see this bracelet to pray for these 5 people. Something we say a lot at Oasis Ministries is prayer rigs the results. So we've seen it happen, we know it's true, and we want to just show you the faith and show you the ability in the prayer in yourself for 5 people in your life. And God's doing a drawing right now, so we want to see their lives touched, their lives saved, and their souls changed. And we want to encourage you, and we want to make this available to you for free. Contact us, numbers on the screen, addresses here, or the website. Thank you so much. God bless you. Okay, so we're going to be in 1 Samuel. I think Jesse said she's starting in 18.
And you said you were starting in 17? Right?
Yes, but you go ahead and start first. I'm just going to kind of run through some stuff.
Okay, so we left off David and Saul. Their relationship is becoming very tumultuous. Saul wants to kill David. That'll just put a damper right on a great relationship. So we're in the midst of this. So Jonathan, Saul's son, and David are like BFFs. They're like super tight. They're like bros. They have like this covenant going on. It's really great. So in chapter 18, we see a transition where Saul is really jealous of David and he's trying to kill David, and David has been very upright. He's treated Saul very respectfully. You know, previously he was anointed to be king, and he could have gone in, it would have been foolish, and been like, hey, I'm actually God's anointed. I'm going to be the next king, and you're old news, old man. But he wasn't like that. He served under Saul. He was faithful and loyal to him. He had this great, he thought was, a good relationship with him. Up until the time that Saul's like, I'm going to kill you, basically. And sometimes there are situations where we inadvertently or accidentally or subconsciously get under someone's skin, and we just don't jive with that person, especially like in the workplace, or maybe it's someone in your family. And we kind of aggravate the situation, maybe not even intentionally. But in this case, David did nothing to Saul. And there are situations you'll probably find yourself in where people just do not like you, and for no reason at all, for real. Like, there's nothing that you've done to this person. You've prayed, you've searched your heart, and you're like, and maybe you've even come forward to this person and been like, hey, have I offended you in some way? And they're like, nah, but you can tell, like, something's up. Someone once told me that sometimes when people have something against you and like you don't even talk to this person, they're not even in your circles, whatever, it's not that they dislike you, the person. They don't like Micah, the person. It's not that. It's they are upset. Something's rubbing their spirit the wrong way because of the Jesus inside of you. And that was like mind-blowing. And I think that was the issue with Saul, is he realized that the Spirit of the Lord had obviously left him. Like, that was very apparent, right? He was tormented at night. He needed the harp to sleep and all of this. But he could sense that the Spirit of the Lord was on David. So, of course, he had this jealous spirit and this anger spirit and this wrath coming against David. So David did nothing wrong, and yet Saul repeatedly is trying to kill him. And that's all it was, is Saul saw the Spirit of the Lord on David, and it enraged him. In verse 30 of chapter 18, I had to flip the page, sorry. It says, Then the princes of Philistines went forth, and it came to pass after they went forth that David behaved himself more wisely than all of the servants of Saul, so that his name was much set by. So David had earned this reputation, like he had earned respect of his, the people around him. Like, people really loved David because he was upright, because he had this great reputation, because he fought for the people. He won lots of battles against the Philistines. And it's so important for us. I'm not saying you need to care what people think about you. Obviously, the Lord's opinion is the only one that truly matters. But it's important that you protect your reputation as much as you can, because it also protects your witness. So if you're seen in unseemly places and you're a pastor and people have this reputation of, well, that pastor just goes to bars, I wouldn't really go to his church, you're not really protecting your witness or your reputation. You're kind of losing your shot to be a witness and win the loss. So it's so important. I think sometimes we kind of put that on the back burner. We're like, well, I don't care what people think of me, which is good, but what is your intentions behind it? Like, are you not caring because you're so busy serving the Lord and doing what the word says that you don't have time to care about what people say? Or are you just like rough and gruff and just going to do what you want and what's right in your eyes? It was kind of convicting, really, that last little verse in chapter 18. Um, and then my notes actually jump up to chapter 23. I didn't know if you wanted to jump in.
I want to touch. I definitely have to touch a little bit in chapter 21. So what we're seeing a man highly, highly anointed by God, and we see a lot of people in the Bible anointed, but we're also seeing a man that has control of his flesh, and that's something you got to be amazed by David here. David's doing stuff right now at a young age that would be mind-blowing for us to do now. And I'm not talking about slaying the tens of thousands. I'm not talking about how he can run and hide. And this guy, he can live off the land. Like if you read chapter 21, 22, and 23, this guy, he's running and hiding a lot. What amazes me about David is he has full control over his wrath, full control over his anger, full control over his emotions towards others. There's one point where he has an easy opportunity to kill Saul. And he's got these mighty men around him. I think it's 400 mighty men. So they're telling him, they're like, do it. And David says no. And then David not only doesn't do it himself, he steadies all his men to not do it. And think of this, think of this situation of these men. They're working for a man who's anointed to be king by God. That's a great opportunity and a place to be. But they're being chased by the current villain who is the king. So they think, if this dude catches up with us, he's going to kill all of us and our families. And I'll talk a little bit about how evil Saul's gotten. And the men know this. This dude is as evil as they come. They recognize this. And if David kills them, they're all getting promotions. And they're all getting access to kingship. They're all getting access to the kingdom. They're all getting access back to their wives and kids. They can go back home and not always have to live and running. There's always going to be war in Israel at this point in time, but they don't always have to run. And David not only has enough God in him to not kill Saul, he could have just been like, well, I didn't kill Saul, but my men did. David was courageous. David's like, no, you not lay one hand to God's anointed. Even though the anointing's lifted off Saul, the last thing David heard was Saul was anointed. And he don't kill him. So David knows that there's a call in his life. But to reach that call, he doesn't rush it. He doesn't push it. He doesn't get ahead of the plan. And I want to read you a few verses here. I'm going to start in Romans chapter 12, verse 10. And I want you guys to kind of saturate yourself in these few verses and just think God, I want this to be in my life. And if you go before this, it talks a lot about love. So Romans chapter 12, beautiful, beautiful chapter, but I'm going to talk a little bit about enemies. Be kindly and affectionate one to another. We're in chapter 12, verse 10. With brotherly love, in honor, preferring one another, not slothful in business, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing instant in prayer. That was one of David's keys. David knew that he could always go to prayer. One thing, if you're facing some things in your flesh and your emotions that you're having issues controlling, you need to go instantly in prayer. It don't need to be an afterthought. It don't need to be, well, I could try this, and I'm for so many things. But your first thought is continuing instantly in prayer. You're not going to win any battle victoriously if prayer is not your first thought. If prayer is a backup, if prayer is a maybe, if prayer is, oh goodness, this is bad, I need prayer, you're not going to win unless God just intervenes for you. On your behalf, the only victory we have is in prayer. And we know this. The most praying person I've met in my life is my dad. The most praying person I've ever read about is Jesus. Jesus, everything was prayer. Before decisions, before anything, Jesus was a man of prayer. We're in verse 13. Distributing to the necessity of the saints, given to hospitality. Bless them, we're in verse 14. Bless them which persecute you. Bless and curse not. That's a hard one. People that's going to persecute is a lot more than talking mean and being rude. Persecute covers everything. If someone like Saul is persecuting David, and David's out here and cuts off a piece of the man's robe, and in his mind he's like, I'm going to show him the slither of his robe, and Saul's, in his mind, he's not even being horrible here, then David has to go and repent for cutting off a piece of his robe. That's how clean this man's heart is at this point in time. Rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with them that weep. Be of the same mind one to another. Mind not high things, but condescend to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceits. Here's where it gets tough, guys. Recompense to no man evil for evil. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceable with all men. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, for it is written, Vengeance is mine, and I will repay thee, saith the Lord. David's not trying to take this wrath and this vengeance in himself. He doesn't want to carry that. And you also got to remember another thing. David may hate Saul. Well, not hate. David may have major issues with Saul. David's best friend and this man that he loves, Jonathan, that's his dad. So David's weighing so many things out. Like, man, I love Jonathan. Saul even hates Jonathan. But Jonathan's got a heart for his dad. We see that over and over. So David's in such a bubble of chaos, but he has a belief, if he stays true to what God's leading him in his spirit. This Romans ain't even written yet, guys. He just feels this in his spirit. He feels that God in him leading him like this. We're in verse 20. Listen to this. This is amazing. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. And that's the amazingness of David. I told you, I'm just going to read a little bit more and I'm going to turn it over to you. David's men, they're fearful of Saul. More than fearful, they're like, this guy is bad news. And if you go to 1 Samuel chapter 21, verse 8, David meets with a priest. And David said unto Ahimelech, And is there not here under thine hand a spear or a sword? For I have neither brought my sword nor my weapons with me, because the king's business required haste. And the priest said, The sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom thou slewest in the valley of Elah, behold, it is here wrapped in a cloth behind ephod. If thou wilt take that, take it, for there is no other save that here. And David said, There is none like that. He remembered that sword. That's a big sword. There's none like that sword. Oh, give that one to me. I'll take that one. And David arose and fled that day for fear of Saul, and went to Achish, the king of Gath. So this priest gives David this sword, and David's like, oh, the sword. Nice. We've made full circle. My sword's back. So he runs. Well, Saul's under a tree. And you can read this. This is, oh goodness. I guess it's chapter 22, verses 6, really all the way down to 23. And I'm just going to kind of paraphrase this because this is going on long. And I challenge y'all, read chapter 22. A very fun, unbelievable chapter. Saul gets his men together, and he's trying to get one of them to tell him where's David. Because he knows the whole kingdom loves David. And they ain't saying nothing. So he says, okay, if you all know, if you go with David, you run in the fields. But if you side with me, you could be you could be generals of your hundreds, or potentially generals of your thousands. So he said, whoever tells me something gets a promotion. All their men remain silent. But one dude stands up and says, I heard of a priest that gave the sword of Goliath to David. So Saul goes there. Saul brings the priest forward, and Saul tells all the men, slew this priest, kill him, kill his family, kill his children. And this is in the homeland right now. And he says, kill all the livestock, kill the sheep, kill the cattle, and then burn down all the houses. All these men stand up to Saul and say, no, I won't do it. Now you think of that. A king is so evil that the men raise up and say, I feel chills right now. They're like, I can't do this. And we saw God lift his anointing from Saul. We saw that happen already. Seen that happen already. Now we're seeing the kingdom being lifted from Saul. The closest people to him are getting sick of it. There's a 50-year reign of this man. It tells us about that in Acts. And right here nearing the end, these people, they're just done. They're like, I don't get it. That one dude that ratted him out has to kill the priest. It says he comes upon him, kills the man, kills all his family, all his children, and burns everything. And these other men, there's a turning point. And I want to tell you right now, if you see people and you're like, man, they're doing some bad things, and I don't understand how they have their position. I don't understand how they are where they are. We talk about payday comes on Friday at Judgment Day. Leave vengeance to God. because there's also pavement here on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that, and we see it comes to Saul. We see it comes to his kid. And it's a tough story, but it's amazing. David blows my mind through this every step of the way, and Jonathan.
Yeah, like you said, Saul ends up hating his own son, Jonathan. So in chapter 20, Jonathan and David are kind of discussing this because it's got to be so awkward, right? Like your best friend's dad is trying to kill you. Like I can't imagine like the strain that puts on their relationship. So in chapter 20, Jonathan and David are talking about this, and he says, "What have I done? What is my iniquity? And what is my sin before thy father, that he seeketh my life?" This is David to Jonathan. In verse 2 it says, "And he said unto him, God forbid that thou shalt die. Behold, my father will do nothing, either great or small, but he will show it in me. And why should my father hide this thing from me? It is not so." So basically, non-KJV version is saying, my dad talks to me about everything, and he wouldn't hide something like this big, and he's already told me he's not going to touch you, in previous chapter. He made a promise. Like, what, that's crazy, David. He's not going to kill you, like, what? And so, verse 3, "And David swore moreover and said, Thy father certainly knoweth that I have found grace in thy eyes. And he saith, Let not Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, there is but a step between me and death." So the second part of that is there's a step between me and death, right? Like that's kind of where we get that saying, 1 foot in the grave, right? Like, so it's pretty serious. But he also, at the beginning of that verse 3, chapter 20, he's also like, I really don't want Jonathan to be grieved about how much his dad wants to murder me. Like, that's so, the compassion and the empathy he has for this man, I'm just like if someone's dad was trying to kill me, I'd be like, yo, what is your dad's problem? They'd be like, oh, my dad doesn't have a problem with you. And I'd be like, listen, here's the list. Like, we're getting down to business. I'm convincing you. But no, he was worried about Jonathan. He didn't want Jonathan to be sad about this, So I think it's the next chapter, in chapter 20, David tells Jonathan, he's like, listen, I can't be there. Like, I cannot be in the king's court. He's going to kill me, whatever. And so he's like, tell him that I went to my hometown and I'm going to offer sacrifice. It's the new moon. It fits. Just tell him that. So Jonathan's like, he's not going to care. And David's like, if he gets mad, you will understand what I'm telling you is true. So Jonathan's like, okay, whatever. Let's do this. So, of course, David skips town because Saul's trying to kill him. And so Saul said, where is David? His seat's empty. Jonathan explains to him, oh, well, he went to his hometown to offer sacrifices, new moon and all that, like the timing's right. And Saul gets mad. He gets furious, like a switch flips, and he's like, you are siding with my enemy. And Jonathan's like, whoa, David's not your enemy. What are you talking about? Like, you don't need to, like, what are we talking about? And Saul's like, you've chosen him, you're ashamed of me and your mom, and he called his mom some terrible things, like, he insulted everybody, and then he, like, throws, I think, a spear or javelin, which is like Saul's go-to move. This is like the third time Saul's done this, mostly to David, and tried to kill him. And Jonathan's like, oh, okay, David was right. Dad is trying to kill him. Dad's gone a little crazy. So in the next few chapters, Jonathan continues to give aid to David, and I think that's an amazing friend that can be there not only while the friend, David, is in duress, fighting for his life, but that he can put aside his physical bias, like, this is his dad, this is someone I'm sure he looked up to, someone he sat on his lap, like, how babies be playing with their parents' faces and, like, be stretching it and all that. Like, he had that relationship with Saul at one point, and, he's kind of had to let that go. I can't imagine how hard that is. But to be such a good friend to David in this time, David is a hero. David's a champion, and his character was upright. But to see Jonathan pour out like this is amazing. He ends up warning him in the next chapter. He's like, you gotta run, I'm sorry. And it's just like, it's like he lost his father and his best friend, like, in a short time, basically.
And his wife.
Yeah, honestly.
Because his wife is Jonathan's sister and Saul's daughter.
Yeah.
This dude goes through it. So the verse, Jesse, she quoted half of it, but I want to read it, and it's this verse right here. 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 18. Then Jonathan said to David, tomorrow is the new moon, and thou shalt be missed, because thy seat will be empty.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes us right back to these. Get you these bracelets and realize there's seats empty. And you need to fight for those people just like Jonathan fights for David.
Yeah.
There's an enemy that wants to destroy them, but there's a God that wants to anoint them and bring them home and restore them.
Amen.
So you have to fight harder for their restoration than the enemy wants for their destruction. This is a calling of being a Jonathan in people's lives.
It is, yeah. We do We do give Jonathan credit, but I think we could give him additional credit. Like, he really comes through. It's really inspiring. I'm like, I don't know if I could be that good a friend, you know?
If you read through this story and think of all the surroundings, like Jonathan is surrounded by, I don't know about untold, but a lot of wealth.
Mm-hmm.
There's one thing I read, and I talked about this in Sunday school, the story where he shoots the arrow and he says if it goes this far, David's hiding.
Yeah, it's right after this.
Right after this. We'll talk about this next week. But Jonathan has so much money, he's got an arrow caddy. So you think of a golf caddy, Jonathan has a dude that just goes and gets arrows. That's all he does for Jonathan. Because Jonathan is a fantastic marksman. And, you know, he's risking everything. He's not just risking what his dad thinks of him. If his dad, you know, he's risking everything.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And I mean, I know that he had to have done that with a heavy heart, but he pushed through. I don't know.
Amen. Thank you so much for tuning in with us this week. Please take a moment, like, comment, and share. We'd love to have more people see these podcasts led by the Word. So honored you're here with us. God bless you.
God bless you.